Hello, everybody, and welcome to, my podcast. We don't have a name for it. I'm Jason Mackey. The gentleman on the other side of the screen needs no introduction, Bob Smizik, longtime columnist at our place, Pittsburgh media member. We're going to get into all of that. A great episode for you. We still need a name for this podcast, though, Bob. It's kind of an ongoing joke. I threw out the podcast to be named later, Saturday Conversations. I don't know if I like any of it.
How about the Mackey cast?
The Mackey cast? I don't know. I don't think I want my name in it. I don't want it all about me. Like I think it's going to be awesome what we're talking about today. A lot about your career and just the state of the business and that. I don't know. We'll come up with something.
I'm sure you will.
Not sold on it yet, but we're going to talk. It's Super Bowl this week. Bob has covered about 472 of them, so we're gonna talk about that. No, but and talk about his memories of covering the Steelers there, other teams. We'll get into some Pirates, Penguins talk, all of that. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with insurance companies, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. All right, Bob, let's get into it here. A little Steelers Super Bowl stuff. How many Super Bowls have you covered?
I'm not real sure. I would say 10 or 11, Jason.
Okay. Anyone that stands out as your favorite? What'd you like?
Well, I would say the Super Bowl when Willie Parker broke the 75-yard run for a touchdown, and when Randall L. threw a touchdown pass to Hines Ward, Steelers won the Super Bowl. That was fabulous. I really enjoyed that one.
So, Bob, I covered one Super Bowl, and it didn't involve the Steelers. I've covered a Stanley Cup. One thing I thought that was really weird about the Stanley Cup final is watching it in the bowels of Bridgestone Arena, not watching it live. You're watching it on TV.
I've done that.
Really?
Yes.
For which one? What?
It was the no, the Penguins was not involved. It was the Red Wings and the Flyers. I wouldn't know what year. Yeah. But that's one of two. The other time I covered the Stanley Cup was the year they won it for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. 91. That's such a weird thing about hockey. In the football, you have enough time, obviously, to like file your story and go down there. But with hockey, you just go down and, sometimes people go down in the second intermission or halfway through the third period or whatever down to a media room. It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, I will tell you, this is the year they lost. I'm blanking on that. But Ron Cook and I were writing the story. The game was in overtime. If the Penguins won, he did this. If the Penguins lost, I did this. We had to write it immediately, so it was a little crazy. Our deadline was as soon as the game is over, and we were able to jabber something up. But it was something you apparently have been through before, and it kind of hectic. Yeah.
I not to dwell too much on this. It's just like, in the Stanley Cup final in 2017, I love the story. It was a 0-0 hockey game in Game 6. Like, what the heck do you write about a scoreless hockey or a 0-0 hockey game?
That's a tough one.
And then Hornquist scores with, 2 minutes left or whatever the heck it is, and you got to hurry up and change. I mean, neither of us would trade it for the world. We love this, but right. It's such a stuff that people don't think about. So,
Jason, excuse me, this is before your time. But when I worked for the Pittsburgh Press, I was covering the Pirates, and I covered Pitt football and basketball at the Press. There was no deadlines. It was an afternoon paper. You had all day, or I should say all night, to write your story. Now, you didn't take that time, but that was so much, I don't want to say it was easier or better, but it was so different. When I went over to the Post-Gazette and had those immediate deadlines, it was kind of jarring, but it was also nice to be through 30 minutes after the game instead of 4 hours after the game.
Right. Yeah, you know what's crazy about that, Bob? Like, I function worse with time. I'd almost rather have a time constraint. If I have time, like all of a sudden I feel like I turn into a worse writer or start overthinking things or whatever. I enjoy the rush of a deadline sometimes.
Well, I did learn to enjoy that too, Jason. I would agree with that.
All right, so some of these Super Bowls, Bob, maybe let's focus on the Steelers ones. Any stories that really stand out from those things other than the play on the field? Just, I don't know, travel stuff, stories you did, stuff like that.
Well, I guess my favorite would have been the Chicago Bears playing the Patriots, I believe, 85 or 86, that great Chicago team coached by Ditka. That's when Jim McMahon was the quarterback. He got into all kinds of trouble on Bourbon Street. That was the whole story of the week. And McMahon was kind of a talkative, arrogant kind of guy. The kind of guy, by the way, who could never win a Super Bowl in the modern era. He was kind of a nothing. But that one really, really sticks in my mind. And the year that the Raiders beat the Redskins, that may have been my first Super Bowl. And that's when Al Davis made the great, long-lasting, long-remembered quote, "Just win, baby, just win."
I love it.
Yep. I'll tell you another story. I was with Ron Cook. He had to diagram the key play in the game. That was one of his duties. Okay. Joe Gibbs was the man, the coach doing in the interview room. His PR guy says, "We've got to end this. We've got to end this." Still, it goes on for about 3 or 4 minutes. Now he's leaving. Cook approaches him and says, "Joe, could you give me another minute?" And Gibbs gave him another minute. So they're really classy on his part.
I love it. That's fantastic. We got to get Cook on here. I don't know if he'd ever do it, but I would love that.
I would say no, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any event, Bob, outside of the Super Bowl that you've never covered? I mean, you've covered so much. You've been so many places that you never got a chance to do that you'd love to.
I think I've covered almost everything, Jason. Not all. I even covered the Indy 500.
Wow.
Yes, I got covered the Preakness and the Kentucky Derby, U.S. Open tennis, U.S. Open golf. So I really think I've just about done it all.
Love it. So this week, Chiefs, Eagles, who do you like and why?
I like the Chiefs. I think they just got they're the dynasty. I think they know how to win these games. I think the Eagles are very good. They're a little, to my way of thinking, one-dimensional, but there's nothing wrong with having Barkley as your ace. But I think the Chiefs will win them. I expect a very good, close game. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, same, Bob. Same. My brain says the Chiefs, but my heart says the Eagles. Not that I'm going to break up with Pittsburgh and go root across the state. I just want to see something different. I want to see Barkley get something.
That would be nice. But all my life, Jason, at least before I got into journalism, I was a front runner when I was a kid. New York Yankees, Boston Celtics. So I'm still a front runner. That's why I like the Royals.
I love that you admit you're a front runner. Most people try to deny that, Bob. You're good.
I have no problem with it.
All right, let's talk a couple Steelers topics, and we'll take a launching off point with Kenny Pickett. I was asked about this on one of our podcasts yesterday. Did the Steelers do anything wrong with Kenny Pickett? Did they do him dirty? Like, how do you look at that scenario? Like a young man getting an opportunity in another place? I don't know where I fall on it. What about you?
Well, I think the only mistake they made with Pickett was drafting him. I don't think they made any mistake with him playing. They gave him ample opportunity to show his stuff, and he certainly was not up to the challenge. I think they made a mistake in drafting him. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, they had to let him go the way they did. Maybe it's possible he could have eventually come on. I don't think so. But no, they never should. Why they took him in the first round with, I can't remember, was the 15th pick or whatever it was. It still blows my mind to this day. And people say, well, it's because he was from Pitt. I would like to think that the Steelers do not base their drafting on taking hometown players. So I just think they totally misevaluated him.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he got enough of an opportunity here, like you said, Bob. And the idea that he was upset at having to hold his own for Russell. Well, give me a break. You have not done enough at this level to cement a starting job. You bring in a better quarterback. That happens all the time. You've got earn your way back onto the field. And if you're going to throw a tantrum, I'm sorry, I don't want you on my team. Get out. That's the way I'd look at it.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more.
All right. So a couple other Steelers topics this week. This was really something. You read the same story, Gerry Dulac reporting about Arthur Smith not allowing Russell Wilson to audible at the line. I think Mike Tomlin has a hand in this. I doubt you would disagree, Bob, but how do you address that? Like that can't continue, right? If you bring in a new quarterback, you just can't keep operating like that. I guess how surprising was that, and what did you think about that whole storyline?
Well, when I read that, it was a two day, like maybe Thursday or Wednesday afternoon when Gerry broke it. Absolutely astonishing, completely unheard of in my belief. How do you tell your veteran quarterback you can't make changes at the line of scrimmage? And as Gerry pointed out in the story, the offense declined, albeit against much tougher competition, once they put that edict in. You just can't do that in NFL in 2024, 2025. And I'd like to know what the explanation was. Obviously, they said that Wilson was doing things they didn't like. Well, tell him, don't do those things that you can't do this and this and this, but you can do that, and that. They greatly limited his ability. And that was a tremendous handicap they put on their offense.
Yeah.
I believe Tomlin was probably behind it.
Yeah. I mean, at minimum, he didn't stop it. You have to know what's going on. How do you not, if you bring in a guy, how do you not let him do that? I just don't, you're a veteran quarterback who's won a Super Bowl. He's been to so many Pro Bowls. That's what he should be able to do to help you. I don't understand why you wouldn't allow the man to do that. All right, one more Steelers question, Bob, and then we're going to move on to a little bit about your career path, Pirates, something both in our wheelhouse. But Najee Harris, it's the latest subject of the wheel always turning with the Steelers. Now apparently could come back. Is that a good move for the Steelers? I don't think so, personally.
Well, I have to admit, I was not aware of that, Jason. I thought they declined his option. And
okay. Well, Dulac wrote this morning that he could be back on like a 2 or okay. All right. I don't want to put you in an awkward spot then. I found it surprising. If it were me, I'd want to move on. I don't think it's worth that sort of value. I don't think he's had the fit in the offense.
He's been a slightly above average running back. He's really good at breaking tackles. But no, they need to move on from Najee, and I would be surprised if he comes back. They can do better than that, and especially I would assume it would cost them a lot of money to bring him back.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get into Bob's career, transitioning between beats, going to a columnist, the differences in journalism when Bob did it versus what I'm doing now. Something Bob and I have talked about privately over breakfast a few times. We'll describe all of that, but first, the message from the Bradenton Area Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Welcome back to, a podcast to be named later, the Mackey Cast, Saturday Conversations, something like that. We'll figure it out. Like I've said on here before, let me know your feedback, jmackey at post-gazette.com. Shoot me an email if you hate any of those podcast titles. We'll come up with something before too long. Talking to Bob Smizik, of course, and Bob needs no introduction, like I said, but started at the Press in 1969, was on Pirates. Bob, 72 to 77. You switched to Pitt, 78 to 82, became a columnist in 83. Did I get those dates right? You're really
good, Jason. Yes.
All right.
That's accurate. Yeah.
Okay. And you took a buyout in December of 2008, but you kept your blog going until 15.
I started the blog after I left the print edition. Started that about February of 2009.
Okay. Very good. Way back when, Bob, what made you want to get into print journalism?
Well, I always had an interest in it, Jason. As a kid, I really liked to read the sports pages. you may get in high school, I was not on the student newspaper. And Phil Music, like me, also went to Peabody. He was ahead of me. We were in Peabody at the same time. Neither one could make the student newspaper because it required a B in English, which neither of us were able to attain.
What grade did you have, Bob?
Pardon me?
What grade did you have in English?
Oh, a C. If I was lucky, it was a C. I was not a good student, Jason. You don't want to go there.
All right. So you were in the student newspaper, but you still liked writing or still enjoyed the sports pages.
And I was at Pitt. I had been at Pitt for a year or two, and a friend of mine literally dragged me up to the Pitt News and got me to sign up and introduced me to the sports editor. And I started writing, and I really enjoyed it. I remember my first story was on a Pitt indoor track meet. I called the coach at home, then took the streetcar from my house down. I didn't live on campus, down to the Pitt News, handed in my article. That was the first thing I ever did. I eventually became sports editor of the Pitt News, did that for 2 years. I also, after I graduated, I worked for Beano Cook and Jim O'Brien's publication called Pittsburgh Weekly Sports, but I majored in education. So I taught for 4 years before I went into journalism, never applied for a job. I remember the day very well. I was the first sports information director at Point Park College. I know you didn't know that.
I didn't. No. And I knew you had an educational background to a degree. I
was sitting in my office one day in the winter, and Roy McHugh, the Pittsburgh Press, called me, offered me a job. I was just stunned and flabbergasted because I had never applied. I didn't even know Roy knew who I was. He was the sports editor and the lead columnist of the Post-Gazette. Tremendous journalist, one of the best ever in Pittsburgh. He's right up there with Myron Cope. But he offered me the high school beat. I really enjoyed teaching. I was at a great situation at Minadeo School in Squirrel Hill, but I decided I would give this a try. If I didn't like it, I would go back to keep teaching, which I probably couldn't have, but I really enjoyed the work. I covered high school for 2 years. I remember I was at a Pirate game after my 2 years, 1971. Roy McHugh, again, the sports editor, came over to me and asked me if I would like to cover the Penguins. Well, I was flabbergasted. Again, I took the Penguin beat for 1 year. Then all of a sudden, Bill Christine, the baseball writer, leaves, and Pat Livingston, the Steeler writer, is promoted to sports editor. So the Steeler beat is open, the Pirates beat is open. Music and I were the obvious choices. He said to me, he was obviously the first choice. He'd been there longer than I was, extremely talented guy. He said to me, you take which one you want, I'll take the other one. So I took the Pirates, no regrets. Phil took the Steelers, and really that just jump-started his career tremendously because they very quickly became the number one story in town, and Phil covered them phenomenally. I like to think I did a good job in the Pirates. I covered them for 6 years, 72 through 77. Always good teams, no losing teams. A lot of fun, some disappointing seasons, great guys. It's still covering the Pirates, definitely one of the highlights of my career. Beat work is much greater than columnist work. I don't know if you found that to be true, but you're within a community covering the beat, and you become friends with your colleagues who are your competition, but it's still a good relationship. When you become a columnist, you're almost out there by yourself. Even within your own staff, you have competition. So it's a totally different situation. But I covered Pitt for 5 years. I was offered. Let me backtrack. So I was at the Press. Bruce Kyden, who was the sports editor at the Post-Gazette, called me up and offered me the sports editor's job, the columnist job at the Post-Gazette. The press could not offer me that job. They were hunting for a new sports editor. They wanted him to make that job. So I took the job at the Post-Gazette. A columnist, myself and Paul Jays, you probably wouldn't know the name, and Bruce would occasionally write a column, but we were the main columnist. I was there for about 7 months. This is probably the most shameful thing I ever did in my career. The press finally hired their new sports editor, and he wanted me to be his columnist. I thought to myself, well, the press is the primary paper in town. The Post-Gazette's sort of hanging on there like as a second cousin. I'm going to go back to the press because of security. And again, I mean, it was a terrible thing I did to leave the Post-Gazette after they hired me. But I did that, feel terrible about it today. Went back to the press, and lo and behold, after about 5 years at the press, it was the press that went out of business, and the Post-Gazette was the number one paper in town. And having quit like I did, I was positive they would not take me back.
Yeah.
And Gene Collier, who was the other columnist at the press, he also had left the Post-Gazette to come to the press. So I don't think either one of us thought we would be hired, but lo and behold, they hired both of us. There were then 4 columnists, me, Gene, Ron Cook, Bruce Kyden. Kind of an unwieldy situation, but it worked out okay.
Yeah. Wow. That's a heck of a journey.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
So I want to go back to something you said, Bob, I think is interesting. Beat writing being a community versus life as a columnist is definitely interesting, as I found out, somebody who's transitioned from going to a beat to a columnist. But I mean, what was that like in your experience? Like, why do you say it was more of a community versus, being an independent contractor? And what sort of battles did you fight as a columnist? Competition within your own staff, that sort of thing. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, I can. Well, first of all, when the press hired me, I was sharing the job with Pat Livingston, but Pat soon retired, and they brought in Gene Collier. So now I'm clearly the number 2 to Gene. He is in a class by himself, as far as I'm concerned, and he was just at the prime of his game. So It was but he's such a wonderful person that it never became competitive between the two of us. But again, you're out there all by yourself as a columnist.
Yeah.
In my case, when I was at the press, Bob Herzl was the Pirate beat writer and a very good one. He did not like me. So
Interesting.
As a columnist, you have to rely on your beat people to help you out. At least I did, and he was no help whatsoever. So that was the problem. Also for me, it wasn't a problem with the other beats. And, I wasn't ready to be a columnist in 1983. Took me a number of years to really get into the swing of things. I don't know how I could have. I wish I had been going to a columnist school or something like that.
They should have one of those, Bob.
Yeah,
this is such a weird life.
Just throwing me into, one day I'm covering the end of the Pitt basketball season. The next day I'm a columnist at another newspaper. It was just crazy. Yeah.
And it's taken me time, and I don't think I've found it yet. You're trying to find your voice, your place, what you do well. I went through Pirate season last year, almost feeling like a wannabe beat reporter. And I'm sure I annoyed the daylights out of poor Noah and Andrew, who, I keep thanking to this day for tolerating me. And
I can see that happening.
But like, you're conditioned to do the job a certain way. I spent, 5 years on Penguins or whatever, 5 years on Pirates. Like, I enjoyed that community. I enjoyed that like competition game and having your nose in it and being around it all the time versus having to spread your efforts and think about, opinion. And I'm going to write this, and I think this, and I think that. And, for a while you're like conditioned to, I'm not going to tell people my opinion. I need to report what I know from this little community. It's just, it almost seems backwards in a way. I never understood how I've got more of an opinion now that I'm further away from the thing. Huh?
Well,
But yeah,
in my situation, I was on the pit beat. I was really fortunate. Tom McMillan was at the Post-Gazette. Ed Bouchette was at the Greensburg paper, or was he at McKeesport? I'm not sure. So we two guys who I'm still friends with today, still see at lunch occasionally. So that was, you were competitive during the day, but if you're on the road, out for drinks after night or for dinner, Tom and I covered the Olympics as fierce competitors, but we had dinner almost every night
yeah,
because that's the way things work out. But when you're that columnist, it's not quite the same.
yeah,
There's no one that you can be close with, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah,
Especially when your baseball beat writer doesn't like you, is
yeah.
what's in my case. Yeah.
And it's also, I feel like so many times as a columnist, you're writing, I need to criticize this person, criticize that person. It's like you're always just the shame guy. And I don't know. I'm like trying to find the balance between, like, you don't want to rip everything all the time versus writing something that's positive and, having some sort of change up pitch. And so it's just an interesting niche to try to find.
Yeah. It's also how people view you. Like I was considered pretty negative columnist. And I to a degree I was, but a lot of Pitt fans really didn't like me. But if you went to Jackie Sherrill or Johnny Majors, I'm pretty sure they would both tell you. And I know in late Johnny Majors' case, I was absolutely their favorite writer. So you can't please everybody. I mean, they understood what the job was about. I always appreciated that, especially Jackie. He knew what the job was about. He knew what I had to do. And consequently, we got along very well. But the people saw that as me being too critical. I was doing my job.
Yep. And I always loved that about you, Bob. And I've told you that before, just how convinced you were, a voice for people in the city. You were never afraid to take a contrarian opinion, and you stood by it and articulated said opinion. And I could read you, even if I didn't agree with what you were saying, like, darn it, that's a well thought out argument. That's
Go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
And just that's a very convincing man, a convincing writer. Anyway.
My first obligation was to the readers. After that, I had no other obligation.
Yeah, and I've learned that from you. I've tried to pull that and put that into my own game about thinking about you're writing for the readers. You're not writing to serve anybody else. Exactly. And I can still get better in that. It's an area I've grown. I'm not where I'm at, where I want to be. So
we all can get better, sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's tackle a couple Pirates topics here before we get into kind of a round robin, bounce around Pittsburgh sports in the final segment. But so they had Tommy Pham yesterday. I'm guessing you started planning a parade, or I don't know what sort of World Series plans that you canceled to clear out space, but what'd you make of that?
Jason, I was on with Jim Colony on the Fan about 4 weeks ago, and he said to me, well, why aren't they going after Santander, the Baltimore outfitter who signed for, and I just laughed at Jim. Jim, there's no way in the world they're going to go after guys like that. So I had low expectations, but they have exceeded my low expectations. Adam Frazier and Tommy Pham, I don't know if it was in the same week, but the same month. Yep. Incredible. Pham was once both were once good ball players. They're well past their prime. Frazier looks like he could be done. Pham may still have a little bit left in him, but they had to do better than those guys. I mean, their expectations are so low. I can only assume it falls to the owner, who will not provide the payroll. And he apparently has no shame. And I tell you, and I tell everyone, when he tells you, or when he tells the media that he's interested in winning, of course, everyone wants to win, but his commitment to winning is not what it should be. It's not what the other owners in Major League Baseball is. So his commitment is to making money. And the Pirates, I have passion for baseball. It's my favorite sport to cover because it's all right there in front of you. Yeah. And it's easy to see. It's not like hockey where boom, boom, boom. It's not like football where even the coaches have to watch the film before they know what's happened. It's all right there. and I love baseball, but I'm just stunned and shocked at what they've done this year.
Yeah, I mean, they've made their team worse. They've added negative WAR. I don't know if that has happened before, where you've gone through an offseason and you've spent $15 million to add negative wins above replacement.
Well, what you
It's
put
stunning.
on Twitter almost right after the trade
The Connor Joe
priceless.
thing.
Yeah. And Connor Joe, probably a better option than Tommy Pham. You showed the numbers. He's also a younger guy. He's also more versatile.
I know. I mean, to be fair, Bob, I don't want either one. Like, I
Right.
wish they were shooting higher, but that's the first thing that struck me. It's like, it is the same player. Now, polar opposite personalities,
Yes.
in which it might be fun if Tommy Pham fights somebody in the clubhouse, I suppose. I think that's what I like the most about the deal. Somebody's going to stir some stuff up in that clubhouse. Like, it is too quiet. And I feel like Tommy Pham is going to do that, if nothing else.
Well, that's possible. It's tough for an outsider coming in to do that. But if anyone is capable, it would be him, I guess.
All right. Some perspective, Bob. When's the last time you've seen Pirates fans or Pittsburgh sports fans in general this mad?
Wow, that's a good one, Jason. Considering the upsurge in fandom that I've seen in my lifetime, all I need to tell you was there were 14,000 people there the day Clemente got his 3,000th hit. Today, if that were Andrew McCutchen going for his 3,000th hit, you couldn't get near the place. You couldn't get a ticket, anything. So the intensity of the fandom is just increased enormously. So this is probably the worst time in Pittsburgh sports history. The Penguins, I can't believe what bad.
Bob, you think this is the worst time in Pittsburgh sports history? I'm not doubting you. You have more of a lens on that than me, certainly.
Well, I go back pretty far.
Yeah.
In the 50s, the Pirates were really horrible. The Steelers weren't very good, but there were no Penguins back then.
Yeah.
So, no, this is the worst, I would say, Jason.
Wow.
This is the time when the most Pittsburghers are angry at their sports teams. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of that anger. We'll go do a quick lap around the Pittsburgh sports scene with Bob right after this. All right. Like I said, very quick one. We're back here on the podcast to be named later, along with Bob Smizik. Bob, you have Bon on your screen. Is that a typo, or are you telling me that you're good?
I did not know that.
That's all right. I just thought you were dropping a little
another typographical
French
error on my part.
I love it.
Had I known that was going to be showing on the screen, I certainly would have done a better job.
That's okay. It's not a problem. We're not here for screen titles.
You can call me Bond.
Yeah, you're just telling everybody that you're good. That's all right. All right. So I want to start with some hockey stuff in this last segment, Bob. Are you going to watch the Four Nations face-off? Are you the least bit interested
quite
in this?
frankly, I have no interest in that.
Okay. Should hockey be in the Olympics? Do you care if it's in the Olympics?
I think it's a good idea to be in the Olympics. It's a tough deal because they're in the same season, but they've done it before. I think hockey could really use the push, the jump that the Olympics give them.
Okay. If the Pirates are somehow halfway decent, I know this is a bit of a fantasy land question, but that's the spirit of the thing. What would have to happen for that to occur?
Well, a lot of question marks would have to become exclamation points. Hayes, Gonzalez, Henry Davis, Bart, Pham, or Jack Sawinski. All those guys would have to have good years, and that's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I wrote a thing that they're making a lot of bets, and Noah Hiles framed it as they have a lot of if players. If Key Brian Hayes stays healthy, if Jack Sawinski figures it out. I thought Noah did the best job of articulating that. There's just too much uncertainty.
Absolutely. The only thing that they can really count on that team are Reynolds and Cruz. I'll say Cruz. Yeah. Other than that, there's 7 other question marks, and I'll include McCutchen in that group too.
Sure. Who's their best position player in 25? Probably between Reynolds and Cruz, right?
Yeah, I would still stick with Reynolds right now. I think Cruz has Hall of Fame ability. Let's see if he can do it. But I would take Reynolds.
All right. Do you see Pitt basketball as a tournament team?
No, I do not. They are really tumbling. They might be an NIT team. They're not an NCAA team.
Yeah, I should have specified. Sorry.
Yeah.
Who do you think's the Steelers quarterback next season? Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, or door number 3?
If you ask me who I think it should be, I would say, surprising a lot of people, Russell Wilson.
Really?
I just don't. Justin Fields has started over 40 games in his professional career. Have he shown you anything to indicate he's the Super Bowl winning quarterback?
No.
Okay.
But I don't know if my opinion changed a lot after Gerry's story this week. If that's if Russell Wilson was limited because he couldn't change plays and like get them out of what he should have gotten them out of, and they want him to run 3 yards on a cloud of dust, I don't know if we saw the best version of Russ over the final 5 years.
Probably not. Neither is a good option. I think Wilson, if they want to have give them the best team next year, I think Wilson's the best option. I don't think it'll happen, but I think he's the guy.
All right, last question before we get into one wrap-up topic, Bob. What position do the Steelers select in the first round? Or what position should they select in the first round?
I would say wide receiver. Since they're probably going to trade Pickens, I think wide receiver. I know that's kind of unusual to take a wide receiver in the first round, but I think that's their greatest need because you've got to give your quarterback some weapons. Yeah. They have a lot of holes. I just think that's the most important spot.
Okay. Let's wrap this up with a little my era versus your era talk, Bob. You follow a lot of media today. You read things. I see you on Twitter. You and I have had conversations off the air. What do you think when somebody who went through a completely different grind, like how you did the job and how I do the job are very different, but I think there are some links that are in there that are the same. What do you think about when you see media today and how teams are covered?
Well, first of all, I think in most cases they do a very good job. I told you what it was like when I was a beat writer. I had all day to write my stories. These guys are on Twitter. They're doing all kinds of things during the game. I would like to see, and this is probably particularly so, not so much with the Steelers, but with the other beats, I would like to see a little more adversarial relationship. I think that's part of the job. And I
between who?
Between the beat writers and the team.
Okay, all right.
Okay, what did you think I meant?
I don't know, like beat reporters fighting each other, man. This is a weird media market. I don't know.
Well, I can see why you would take that. No, I meant between the writers and the team. I just think it's gone too far in the other direction. It's not crazy. It's not out of control, but I think it's gone too far in the other direction.
It is different now versus I think when you did it, and I'm not excusing it. I agree with you, and that's something I'll try to do. But, it is access stinks so much, and nobody, I don't know. We can't fight somebody, but like you're going to get looked at weird if you start going in there trying to antagonize people.
Well, that happens to be very true, but that happens to come with the job. That's how I feel about it. I had a lot of guys on the Pirates that didn't talk to me by the time I was through in that beat, but I still was covering it pretty well.
Yeah, good point. Bob, thanks so much for doing this, man. I appreciate it. It's always
my pleasure, Jason.
All right, take care. Thank you much. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can get all of these videos and so much more on our Post-Gazette North Shore Drive podcast and YouTube channel. For Bob Smizik, I'm Jason Mackey. We'll talk to you next week.